It happened on a random Tuesday morning, when nobody was even talking about the Lakers. No trade rumors. No breaking news alerts buzzing on phones. And then, out of nowhere, one email changed everything. An email sent directly from Luka Doncic himself. And when the words in that email hit the internet, Lakers fans everywhere stopped what they were doing. Because after months of silence, after months of fear, after months of wondering if the king in Los Angeles would ever be the same again, Luka Doncic finally said the 4 words every single fan had been praying to hear. I am fully healthy. But to understand why this one sentence sent shockwaves through the entire basketball world, you have to go back. You have to go back to the night everything fell apart. You have to go back to the moment when a dream season turned into a nightmare, when a franchise that had finally found its new identity watched that identity get ripped away in the cruelest way possible. This is the story of how the Lakers fell, how they nearly lost everything, and how one man's recovery might be the spark that brings them roaring back. Let's rewind the clock. Picture Los Angeles, a city that lives and breathes basketball, a city where the purple and gold jersey means more than just a team. It means pride, it means history, it means legacy. For years, this franchise belonged to one man, LeBron James. The king ruled Los Angeles for the better part of a decade. He gave them a championship. He gave them hope. He gave them a bridge from one era to the next. But even kings cannot rule forever. And deep down, everyone in that locker room knew that a new chapter was coming. Nobody expected it to come the way it did, though. Nobody expected a trade that would shake the entire NBA to its core. It happened suddenly. One February afternoon, word broke that the Dallas Mavericks were sending their franchise cornerstone, a generational talent, a walking highlight reel, a young superstar who could pass like Magic Johnson and score like nobody else in the league, to the Los Angeles Lakers. His name was Luka Doncic. And when that trade call came through, jaws dropped across the entire basketball world. Nobody could believe it. Dallas fans wept. Lakers fans screamed with joy. Analysts on television could barely process it live on air. It was, without question, one of the most stunning trades in the history of professional sports. And just like that, the keys to the Lakers' kingdom were being handed to a 20-something kid from Slovenia who had already proven, again and again, that he belonged in the conversation with the greatest players to ever step onto a basketball court. At first, it was a strange dance. 2 stars, 1 locker room. LeBron James, the aging king, still capable of magic on any given night, and Luka Doncic, the heir apparent, still learning a new city, a new system, a new set of expectations. But something beautiful started to happen. The two of them found chemistry. They shared the floor, they shared the spotlight, and together, they carried the Lakers to 50 wins and the 3rd seed in the Western Conference. It felt like the start of something special. It felt like Los Angeles had done it again, like they had found a way to bridge 2 eras seamlessly, the way only the Lakers seemed to know how to do. Luka signed his name to the franchise that summer, agreeing to stay in Los Angeles on a 3-year deal worth well over $150 million. He posted about it. He said this was just the beginning. He talked about championships, about gratitude, about the love he had already felt from the city and the fans in such a short time. It felt like the beginning of a beautiful story. A superstar, fully committed, fully bought in, ready to build a dynasty in the City of Angels. Then came the season that would test everyone's patience, everyone's faith, and everyone's nerves. The 2025 into 2026 campaign started with promise. Luka Doncic was, quite simply, a problem for opposing defenses. Night after night, he put up numbers that made you rub your eyes and check the screen twice. 30 points. 35 points. Games where he seemed to control the pace of the entire contest like a chess grandmaster, moving pieces exactly where he wanted them. By the time the season wrapped up, the numbers were staggering. 33.5 points per game. 8 assists. Nearly 8 rebounds a night. Shooting over 47% from the field and better than 36% from three-point range. He didn't just lead the Lakers in scoring. He led the entire National Basketball Association in scoring. The best player on the best stage, wearing the most famous jersey in basketball history. Fans allowed themselves to dream. With a roster built around Luka, and with LeBron James still contributing quality minutes, there was a sense that maybe, just maybe, This was the year the Lakers could make a real run at another banner. The team battled through the regular season, fighting for playoff positioning, riding the wave of momentum that came with having arguably the best defensive engine in basketball running the show. And then, in the cruelest possible way, disaster struck. It happened on the 2nd of April. A date that will stick in the minds of Lakers fans the way certain dates always seem to. Luka Doncic went down. Not with a broken bone. Not with a season-ending tear that would require surgery and a year of rehab. But with something that, in its own quiet and sinister way, was almost worse for a team hoping to make a deep playoff run. A grade 2 strain in his left hamstring. For those who don't know basketball injuries, a hamstring strain doesn't announce itself with the horror of a snapped ligament. It doesn't require a stretcher or an ambulance. It just sits there, lingering, threatening to reappear the moment you push too hard, too fast, too soon. And for a player like Luka Doncic, someone whose game depends so heavily on quick bursts, sudden stops, and explosive change of direction, a hamstring injury was like a silent alarm bell ringing through the entire organization. He tried to play through parts of it. He tried to grind. But eventually, the writing was on the wall. Luka Doncic would not return for the remainder of the season. No more regular season games. No more playoff basketball. The best player on the Los Angeles Lakers, the man who had just led the entire league in scoring, was going to have to watch from the sidelines as his team marched into the postseason without him. Imagine being a Lakers fan in that moment. Imagine the mixture of dread and disbelief. All season long, you watched this superstar carry your franchise on his shoulders, night after night, delivering must-see basketball. And now, right as the games mattered most, right as the lights got brighter and the pressure got heavier, he was gone. Not because of a trade. Not because of a suspension. But because his body, worn down by the grind of an 82-game season plus the physical toll of a demanding style of play, simply gave out at the worst possible time. The Lakers still had to play. They still had a first-round matchup to survive. And somehow, against the odds, without their franchise player, they found a way to advance. It was gritty. It was ugly at times. But it was a survival story, a team clawing and scraping just to keep the season alive, holding on to hope that maybe, somehow, Luka would return before it was too late. But then came the second round. And with it, a team that had built a reputation as one of the most dominant, most terrifying defensive units in the entire league. The Oklahoma City Thunder. Young, athletic, deep, relentless. A team that pressured you on every possession, that turned basketball into a track meet on defense, that seemed to have 3 fresh legs on the floor at all times no matter how tired everyone else was. The Lakers, already playing short-handed without their best player, walked into that series like a boxer stepping into the ring with one hand tied behind his back. It did not go well. Game 1, a loss. Game 2, a loss. Game 3, back home in Los Angeles hoping for a miracle in front of their own crowd. Another loss. And then Game 4, the final blow, the sweep completed, the season officially over. 4 games. 4 losses. Not a single victory to show for it in that entire second-round series. The Oklahoma City Thunder dismantled the Lakers with a level of precision and dominance that left fans in Los Angeles staring at their screens in stunned silence. This wasn't just a loss. This was an embarrassment. This was a reminder of just how far this roster still had to go, and just how much this team needed its franchise player healthy and whole if they had any hope of competing with the elite teams in the Western Conference. The locker room after that final game was quiet. Reporters described a somber mood, players sitting with towels draped over their heads, staring blankly at the floor, trying to process how quickly it had all fallen apart. And somewhere, far from the arena, Luka Doncic was watching. Not playing. Not able to help. Just watching his team get swept out of the playoffs, knowing deep down that if his body had cooperated, if that hamstring had never given out, things might have gone very differently. The off-season that followed was filled with uncertainty. There were bigger changes coming than just a disappointing playoff exit. Because not long after the season ended, word began to spread that LeBron James, the king himself, the man who had anchored this franchise for so many years, was not going to be running it back in Los Angeles. His time with the Lakers, the bridge he had built between one era and the next, was finally coming to an end. For the first time since he first arrived in that famous purple and gold jersey years earlier, The Lakers were entering a season without him. Think about what that means for a franchise like the Lakers. This is an organization built on legends. Magic Johnson, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Kobe Bryant, Shaquille O'Neal, LeBron James. Each one of them carried the weight of that jersey, carried the pressure of those championship banners hanging from the rafters, carried the responsibility of being the face of one of the most storied franchises in the history of American sports. And now, with LeBron gone, that torch, that impossible weight, was being passed fully and completely to one man. Luka Doncic. No more sharing the spotlight. No more easing into the role. From this point forward, this was Luka's team. Luka's city. Luka's legacy to build. And he was walking into that responsibility coming off the most devastating injury of his career. An injury that had just watched his team get swept out of the playoffs in embarrassing fashion. Fans didn't know what to think. Was Luka fully healed? Would the hamstring hold up under the grueling demands of an 82-game season? Would the pressure of being the undisputed face of the Lakers be too much, too soon? Whispers and worries spread across message boards and social media. Some fans tried to stay optimistic, pointing to Luka's incredible talent and his history of bouncing back from adversity. Others were more nervous, remembering how hamstring injuries have a tendency to linger, to reappear months later when you least expect them, especially for players whose game relies so heavily on that explosive first step. But while the fans worried from the outside, something else was happening behind the scenes. The Lakers' front office wasn't sitting still. They understood the moment they were in. They understood that with LeBron gone, and with a franchise cornerstone who needed real support around him, this was the summer to make bold, aggressive moves. This was the summer to build a roster worthy of the responsibility now resting on Luka Doncic's shoulders. It started with a blockbuster. The Lakers pulled off a sign and trade to acquire a rising star center from the Utah Jazz, a young big man with size, athleticism, and rim-protecting instincts that this roster had been missing for years. His name was Walker Kessler. For a team that had spent seasons searching for a true anchor in the middle, someone who could protect the paint, alter shots, and give their guards the confidence to attack knowing there was a safety net behind them, this was a massive addition. It gave Luka Doncic something he desperately needed. A legitimate rim protector who could patrol the paint while Luka worked his magic on the perimeter. But the front office wasn't done there. They kept working the phones. They kept adding pieces. Colin Sexton, a dynamic scoring guard with speed and shot-making ability, signed on to bolster the backcourt depth. Matisse Thybulle, one of the most feared perimeter defenders in the entire league, arrived to add toughness and versatility on that end of the floor. Sandro Mamukelashvili came in to provide front-court depth and skill. Zaire Williams joined the mix, a young wing with untapped potential looking for a fresh start. Quentin Grimes was added as well, another two-way threat who could defend multiple positions while contributing offensively. Piece by piece, the front office was constructing a roster designed not just to support Luka Doncic, but to protect him, to lighten the load, to make sure that this team was never again caught as thin and vulnerable as it had been during that painful sweep against Oklahoma City. It was, by almost every measure, an impressive and aggressive offseason. Analysts began to take notice. This roster looked different. It looked deeper. It looked more balanced. And there was still more to come, with rumors swirling about additional all-star caliber players who might be interested in joining forces with Luka in Los Angeles, drawn by the idea of playing alongside one of the most gifted offensive talents the league had ever seen. But through all of the roster moves, through all of the trades and signings, one question hung over everything. Would Luka Doncic actually be ready? All the depth in the world doesn't matter if your franchise player, the engine that makes the entire machine run, isn't fully healthy heading into the season. And then, on a quiet morning in early August, the answer arrived. It came in the form of a personal email, sent by Luka Doncic himself to fans who had signed up to hear directly from him. No press conference. No scripted statement handled by a public relations team. Just Luka, speaking straight to the people who had supported him through the highs of leading the league in scoring and the lows of watching his season end early on the sidelines. And in that email, he delivered the words that Lakers fans had been desperately waiting to hear. My recovery went great, and I'm 100% healthy again. Read that again. 100% healthy. Not mostly healthy. Not cautiously optimistic. Not day to day. Fully, completely, 100% healthy. For a fan base that had spent months worrying about that hamstring, wondering if it will hold up, wondering if the explosiveness that made Luka Doncic one of the most unstoppable offensive forces in basketball would still be there, this was everything. This was the news they had been praying for since that devastating night the injury first happened. Think about the journey it took to get to that sentence. Months of rehabilitation. Months of quiet, unglamorous work in training facilities, stretching, strengthening, rebuilding trust in a body part that had betrayed him at the worst possible moment. Doncic later described taking a real break from basketball during that recovery process, stepping away not just physically but mentally, giving his mind and body the space they needed to heal properly rather than rushing back and risking a setback that could have derailed everything. It would have been easy to panic, to push too hard too fast, especially with the pressure of now being the unquestioned face of the Los Angeles Lakers. Instead, by all accounts, Luka approached this recovery with patience and discipline, trusting the process even when the pressure to return quickly must have been immense. And now, that patience was paying off. The hamstring was healed. The explosiveness was back. The engine that powers one of the most dazzling offensive games in modern basketball was, according to the man himself, fully restored and ready to go. But Luka Doncic wasn't satisfied with simply declaring himself healthy and waiting for training camp to begin. He wanted to do something more. He wanted to bring his team together, not just as teammates who share a locker room, but as a genuine unit, bonded by shared experience before a single practice of the new season had even started. And so, he did something remarkable. He invited the entire Lakers roster to his home country, to Slovenia. Picture it. A 4-day minicamp, set not in the sprawling practice facilities of Los Angeles, but nestled in the beautiful historic city of Ljubljana, Slovenia's charming capital. This wasn't some mandatory corporate retreat organized by the front office. This was personal. This was Luka opening up his home country, his culture, his roots, to the group of men who would be fighting alongside him for a championship in the upcoming season. According to reports, this trip was going to include real, meaningful basketball work. On-court workouts designed to build chemistry between new faces and returning veterans, giving players like Walker Kessler and Colin Sexton and Matisse Thybulle a chance to get comfortable playing alongside Luka before the pressure of the regular season arrived. But it wasn't only about basketball. The trip was also going to include golf outings, sightseeing through the beautiful streets of Ljubljana, and team bonding activities designed to build genuine relationships among a roster that had undergone significant turnover that summer. And the response from the team was staggering. This wasn't a case of a few close friends tagging along to be polite. Reports indicated that 16 of the 17 players on the entire Lakers roster made the trip to Slovenia. 16 out of 17. Think about the logistics of that. Think about the statement that makes. Veterans like Austin Reeves, someone who has grown alongside this franchise through years of change, made the trip. Walker Kessler, the newly acquired center still learning his new team, made the trip. Bronny James, carrying the legacy of his father while building his own path in the league, made the trip. Dalton Knecht, Jared Vanderbilt, Jake LaRavia, all returning players looking to build continuity, made the trip. And the wave of new additions, Quentin Grimes, Colin Sexton, Zaire Williams, Matisse Thybulle, Sandro Mamukelashvili, all of them making the journey across the world to spend 4 days immersed in their new teammates' home country. Only one player was missing. Cameron Carr, the team's most recent first-round draft pick, who was required to attend the NBA's official rookie transition program, a mandatory orientation for incoming rookies that conflicted with the dates of the Slovenia trip. Every other veteran and newcomer alike chose to make the journey. This is the kind of thing that doesn't happen by accident. This is the kind of thing that speaks to genuine leadership. For the first time since LeBron James first arrived in Los Angeles years earlier, there is a new voice setting the tone for this entire franchise. And instead of simply accepting that responsibility from a distance, instead of leading only through what happens on the court, Luka Doncic chose to lead by bringing his team into his world, by breaking bread with them, by showing them a piece of who he really is outside of the basketball arena. Think about what that means for chemistry heading into the new season. Basketball, at the highest level, isn't just about talent. It isn't just about who can score the most points or grab the most rebounds. It's about trust. It's about players who know each other well enough to make the extra pass, to communicate on defense without hesitation, to fight for each other when the going gets tough in the middle of a hard-fought playoff series. Teams that share genuine bonds off the court tend to play with a different kind of energy on the court. And by bringing 16 of his 17 teammates to Slovenia, by golfing with them, sightseeing with them, working out with them in a completely different environment far from the pressures of Los Angeles, Luka Doncic was laying the foundation for exactly that kind of chemistry. It's worth pausing here to really sit with the symbolism of this moment. A few years ago, a young Luka Doncic was traded away from Dallas in a shocking, heartbreaking move that left him blindsided and, by many accounts, deeply hurt. He arrived in Los Angeles not entirely by his own choice, forced to adjust to a new city, a new team, a new set of expectations almost overnight. There were questions, fair questions, about whether he would ever fully embrace the Lakers the way he had once embraced the Mavericks. There were questions about his long-term commitment, questions that lingered right up until the moment he signed his contract extension the previous summer. And now, here he was, not just committed on paper through a contract, but committed in spirit, inviting his entire team into the most personal parts of his life, flying them to his home country, showing them where he grew up, sharing his culture with them. This is not the behavior of a player simply going through the motions of a max contract. This is the behavior of a franchise player who has completely embraced his role as the leader of one of the most storied organizations in professional sports history. So where does that leave the Lakers heading into this new season? Let's take stock of everything that has changed. The king has left the building. LeBron James, the man who anchored this franchise for the better part of a decade, who provided a bridge from one golden era to the next, is no longer wearing the purple and gold. That chapter has closed. It is, without question, the end of an era, and there is a certain sadness to that, a certain sense of finality that comes with watching a legend's time with a franchise finally come to a close. But in that ending, there is also a beginning. A new era has arrived, and this time, there is no ambiguity about who is leading it. Luka Doncic, healthy, motivated, and fully committed to the city and the franchise, is the undisputed face of the Los Angeles Lakers. He enters this season with something to prove. He watched his team get swept out of the playoffs in humiliating fashion, a memory that surely still stings. He knows that questions about his health, about his conditioning, about whether that hamstring injury could resurface, will follow him until he proves otherwise on the court, in real games, under real pressure. And he has already shown, through his actions this offseason, exactly how seriously he is taking that challenge. He didn't hide from the pressure. He didn't shy away from the responsibility. He stepped directly into it, declaring himself fully healthy, and then going a step further by bringing his entire team together in his home country to build the kind of chemistry and trust that championship teams are built on. Around him, the front office has been busy building a roster designed to support him in ways the previous group simply couldn't. A legitimate rim-protecting center in Walker Kessler. Scoring punch off the bench with Colin Sexton. Elite perimeter defense with Matisse Thybulle. Front-court depth with Sandro Mamukelashvili. Versatile two-way play with Quentin Grimes and Zia Williams. This isn't the same roster that got swept by Oklahoma City. This is a team that has been rebuilt, piece by piece, with the clear intention of surrounding their franchise superstar with the tools he needs to make a real championship push. And now, the question that hangs over the entire basketball world as training camp approaches. Can this new-look Los Angeles Lakers team, led fully and completely by a healthy Luka Doncic, actually compete for a championship? Can the chemistry built on the golf courses and in the gyms of Ljubljana translate into wins on the hardwood back home? Can a franchise that has weathered so much change in such a short period of time, the shocking trade that brought Luka to Los Angeles in the first place, the years of adjustment playing alongside LeBron James, the devastating injury that ended last season on such a painful note, the departure of a legend, the complete overhaul of the supporting roster, finally settle into a new identity strong enough to bring another championship banner to Crypto.com Arena? Nobody knows for certain. Basketball has a way of humbling even the most promising rosters and injuries, as this very franchise learned in the most painful way possible last season, can strike at any moment, derailing even the best-laid plans. But what we do know is this. The pieces are in place. The talent is undeniable. The leadership, at long last, has a clear and singular voice. And the man at the center of it all, the player now carrying the full weight of one of the most legendary franchises in sports history, has declared himself ready. 100% healthy. Those were his words. Not maybe. Not hopefully. 100%. And after everything this franchise has been through over the past year, after the heartbreak of that injury, after the humiliation of that sweep, after the uncertainty of a superstar's recovery and the departure of a legend, those 4 words feel like more than just a health update. They feel like a promise. A promise that the pain of last season will fuel something bigger this year. A promise that a healthy, motivated, fully committed Luka Doncic, surrounded by a retooled and deepened roster, and bonded by 4 unforgettable days in Slovenia, is ready to lead the Los Angeles Lakers back to where they believe they belong. At the top. The countdown to training camp has already begun. The mini-camp in Slovenia has wrapped, memories made, chemistry built, bonds strengthened halfway across the world from the bright lights of Los Angeles. Soon, the roster will reconvene back home, ready to turn all of that off-season work, all of that vision, all of that hope, into something real. Preseason games will tip off. Storylines will be tested. And every single person who has followed this franchise through its most turbulent stretch in years will be watching closely, waiting to see if this really is the beginning of something special. Because if there is one thing we have learned about Luka Doncic, it's this. Bet against him at your own risk. He has spent his entire career proving doubters wrong, turning painful setbacks into fuel for spectacular comebacks. He arrived in a new city under difficult circumstances and made himself the face of one of basketball's most iconic franchises within the span of a single season. He suffered a brutal injury at the worst possible time and used the recovery not just to heal his body, but to strengthen his bond with his teammates in ways that no amount of practice back in Los Angeles ever could have accomplished. The Lakers fell hard last season. They fell in a way that stung, in a way that left questions lingering all summer long. But sometimes, the hardest falls set the stage for the most powerful rises. And as training camp approaches, as a fully healthy Luka Doncic prepares to lead a retooled roster into a new era without LeBron James for the first time in years, there is a growing sense across Los Angeles that maybe, just maybe, this fall was exactly what this team needed to finally rise all the way to the top. The next chapter of the Luka Doncic era in Los Angeles is about to begin. And if the events of this offseason are any indication, from the bold roster moves, to the emotional trip to Slovenia, to the simple but powerful declaration that he is finally, completely healthy, this chapter might just be the one Lakers fans have been waiting for since the very day this superstar first arrived in their city. The wait is almost over. Training camp is coming. And for the first time in a long time, the entire city of Los Angeles has every reason to believe that their team, led by a healthy and hungry Luka Doncic, is finally ready to turn heartbreak into history. Let's go back for a moment and really sit inside that playoff sweep, because to understand how far this team has come this offseason, you have to understand just how low that moment truly felt. Picture the Lakers' locker room after that 4th and final loss to Oklahoma City. The season is over. Not with a whimper, not with a close, hard-fought defeat that at least leaves you with some pride. It ended with a sweep. 4 games. 0 wins. The kind of result that doesn't just end a season, it forces an entire organization to look itself in the mirror and ask hard questions. Was the roster good enough? Was the depth there? Could this team have competed even with a healthy Luka Doncic? Or were there deeper issues that no single player, no matter how brilliant, could fix on his own? Those questions mattered, because the Thunder that beat the Lakers that spring weren't just good. They were young, hungry, and terrifyingly deep, the kind of team that could throw wave after wave of fresh legs at you every single night. The Lakers, already playing without their franchise player, simply didn't have the horses to keep up. And when the series ended, there was no hiding from what everyone already suspected. This roster needed more than just a healthy Luka Doncic to return. It needed reinforcements. It needed depth. It needed size. It needed players who could defend at a high level on one end while still contributing enough offense to keep the machine running on the other end. That's exactly why the moves this offseason mean so much more than they might seem on the surface. When you watch a front office simply add talented names to a roster, it can be easy to shrug it off as business as usual, the kind of roster shuffling that happens every summer across the league. But when you understand the context, when you understand that this team was just publicly humiliated in the second round of the playoffs without their best player even on the floor, every single one of those additions starts to feel like a direct answer to a very specific and very painful problem. Walker Kessler wasn't just an exciting young center added for the sake of adding size. He was the answer to a defense that had no rim protection to speak of during that series against Oklahoma City. Matisse Thybulle wasn't just a nice depth piece. He was a direct answer to a team that had gotten torched defensively by one of the most athletic rosters in the league. Collin Sexton wasn't just another scoring guard. He was insurance, a player who could step in and provide instant offense on nights when Luka Doncic needed a breather, something this roster desperately lacked the year before. Every single move made this summer feels less like a random collection of transactions and more like a very deliberate, very calculated response to the exact weaknesses that were exposed in that gut-wrenching sweep. And now think again about that trip to Slovenia, but through this new lens. This wasn't just a fun team bonding trip. This was Luka Doncic, still just months removed from watching his team get dismantled while he sat helpless on the sidelines, taking matters into his own hands. He couldn't control the injury that ended his season early. He couldn't control the front office's roster decisions, though clearly he had plenty of input given how tailored those moves were to the team's needs. But he could control this. He could control whether his new teammates walked into training camp as strangers or as a group that had already shared meals together, already laughed together on a golf course in his home country, already sweated through workouts together in an unfamiliar gym halfway across the world. That is the kind of leadership that doesn't show up in a box score, but often ends up being the difference between a talented team that underachieves and a talented team that finds a way to exceed expectations when the pressure is at its highest. There's also something worth mentioning about the timing of all of this. Remember, Luka Doncic signed his extension with the Lakers under a cloud of uncertainty about his long-term commitment to the franchise. He had been traded away from Dallas in a move he never asked for, a move that reportedly left him blindsided and hurt. There were legitimate questions at the time about whether he would ever fully embrace Los Angeles the way he had embraced the organization that drafted him and developed him into a superstar. Fast forward to this summer, and look at what we're seeing instead. A player who is not only staying, not only signing on the dotted line, but going out of his way, using his own home country, his own personal time, his own resources, to bring an entire roster together before a single game of the new season has even been played. That is not the behavior of a player who is simply fulfilling a contractual obligation. That is the behavior of a player who has fully turned the page, who has fully accepted the crown, and who is now doing everything in his power to make sure that crown sits atop a championship contender. Of course, none of this guarantees success. Basketball, especially at the highest level of the NBA, has a brutal way of humbling even the most well-constructed rosters and the most inspiring off-season storylines. Chemistry built in Slovenia still has to translate onto an NBA hardwood floor under the bright lights of a growing rivalry with contenders across the Western Conference. A hamstring that has been declared 100% healthy in an email still has to hold up across an 82-game regular season grind, followed by the even more punishing physical demands of a long playoff run. New additions like Walker Kessler and Collin Sexton and Matisse Thybulle still have to prove they can perform at a high level within the flow of Luka Doncic's game, learning his tendencies, his passing angles, the way he manipulates opposing defenses possession after possession. But here is what makes this storyline so compelling heading into the new season. Every single piece appears to be pointed in the right direction. The health is there, according to the player himself. The depth is there, according to a front office that clearly learned hard lessons from that painful sweep. The chemistry is being built, quite literally, on the other side of the world in the birthplace of the very superstar this franchise now fully belongs to. And the motivation, the hunger to erase the memory of that embarrassing playoff exit, is etched into the mind of every single player who was in that quiet, somber locker room after Game 4 against Oklahoma City. So when training camp finally opens, when the preseason games begin, when the first tip-off of the regular season finally arrives, all eyes will be on Luka Doncic. Not just to see if he can still fill up a stat sheet the way he always has, because few doubt that ability. The real question everyone will be watching for is whether that hamstring holds up under real game speed, real physical contact, real defensive pressure from opposing teams game after game after game. Every explosive first step, every sudden change of direction, every hard landing after a contested layup will be a small test. A small piece of evidence in the larger question of whether this recovery was truly as complete as Luka Doncic promised in that email to fans. And if it holds. If that hamstring truly is 100% healthy, and if the depth added this offseason proves capable of supporting him the way it was designed to, then the Los Angeles Lakers enter this season as a legitimately terrifying team in the Western Conference. A healthy Luka Doncic, fresh off the most humbling defeat of his career, surrounded by a roster deliberately built to cover his weaknesses and support his strengths, entering his first full season as the undisputed leader of one of the most historic franchises in the sport. That is not a storyline to take lightly. That is the kind of storyline that championship runs are made of. The wait is almost over. Training camp is coming. And for the first time in a long time, the entire city of Los Angeles has every reason to believe that their team, led by a healthy and hungry Luka Doncic, is finally ready to turn heartbreak into history.